open up our Bibles to Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7 will be in verse 7. I know most of you have it memorized, but we're going to be in Matthew chapter 7. Man, I tell you what, I hope everyone had a really good Easter. I felt like we had a really good Easter as a church. We had a lot of visitors and kids came and everybody had a lot of fun. I keep hearing from everyone that I talk to that they really enjoyed last Sunday, and I hope everyone felt that way and whatever you did afterwards. But I also hope that you've been keeping in mind that man, it's such a disservice if we allow a day like last Sunday to come and we don't really think about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and what it should mean to us in our faith in Jesus and the way that it should impact us. And you know, it's something that's really been bothering me because I was preparing myself for weeks preaching about the death, burial, and resurrection and how it's the foundation of Christianity and how I want to focus on it more and allow it to change the way that I live. And I'm disappointed because, man, the day right before Easter, I really failed. You know, I had a heavy week leading up to Easter, and I got up Saturday morning, and somehow I ended up being involved in organizing the community sunrise service, and of course I was still working on my sermon, and I had to run to Lubbock, and things were just crazy, and I wanted my grandkids, 5 of my grandkids, to come spend the night so that they could come and be involved in our Easter hunt. I'm glad they did. Of course, we had a family event at my house afterwards, so man, I was just overwhelmed, and I remember it was like an hour and a half before my grandkids were going to arrive. I was like, man, I got so much to do. I got to run to Bronx because I got to go to the grocery store over there. Of course, I forgot stuff. I'm last minute. And the bad thing is I drove up and a lot of people were last minute. I seen the parking lot was full over there. And I'm like, man, I need to get in here. I need to get back to the house. Get in another 45 minutes of study. And I went in there and grabbed my stuff. And the line had started at the counter and it kind of went into one of the aisles, you know. And so I was back in the back. So I rolled right into that aisle and got in there. And as people paid it, I was able to kind of go into where it was open out of the aisle. I looked and I seen a couple people standing off to the left by the counter, and I was like, hey, listen, I'm sorry, I didn't realize y'all were in line, you know, and of course they said, listen, no, we weren't in line, so they left that spot and went around, they came in behind me. Of course, as I'm waiting, the line's going, I heard this lady say, well, I actually thought you were in line, right? And that's why she was standing on it. He said, well, I kind of was. So then the whole thing started going, right? I'm going through this whole deal here, because what should I have done, right? I'm supposed to say, hey, no, listen, if y'all were in line, y'all need to go before me, right? And I mean, that's what I wanted to do. That's what it was going on in my mind. That's where I'm going at, but I'm going back and forth because I'm like, man, I still got to make phone calls for the sunrise service. I've got so much to do. I need to study some more. And I'm like, maybe I should just walk behind them. I should just not even ask them. I should just let them go before me. But I've only got a few items. They got 2 baskets. And, I'm going through this whole process in my mind. Right? Like, man, I know what I need to do. Guess what happens? If people in front of me go, I pay, and I leave, and I'm driving, and all the way back, I'm struggling. I'm knowing that I failed. I know I did wrong. The verse that's going through my mind all the way back home is James in chapter 14, verse 17, right? And he says, if anyone, right, in knowing the good they should do and don't do it, he says it is sin for them, right? That's the verse, man. Like that verse is playing in my mind. Like if you know what's good and you don't do it, he said that's sin for them. Like, and it's bothering my conscience. And I know what was I supposed to do in that situation? I did. But guess what I'm doing? I mean, I'm justifying myself through the whole thing. Like, listen, I'm doing stuff for the Lord. Right? You know what I mean? I'm doing all this good stuff, and and I get home, and I'm like, man, I got another half hour to study for my grandkids get here. Because as soon as they get here, I'm going to be busy. And, but I sat down at my desk, and afterwards I just said, listen, Ricardo, why in the world didn't you let them people go and just trust God? You know what? Why? Why didn't you just do what you knew you were supposed to do and just trust God? Like, and all through the week, everyone has commented like, "Hey, the sunrise service went really good, man. Like, we really appreciated it." And the only person who said anything bad was Jeremy. He said, "I could have preached better in my sleep than that, you know." But and that's true. It wasn't bad. That's true. But other than that, I'm like, everything worked out. Everything worked out. Why, when I knew what was right, why couldn't I have just done what God wanted me to do and trust Him? And I failed. I see it. But I'm going to reset myself. And Matthew chapter 7 has been going through my mind all week. All week I've been, okay, where do I go from here? The resurrection came. Jesus died, was buried, and He rose again. And I don't want this just to be some holiday that we'd celebrate so often. I want to do something different. I want to be more like Jesus Christ. I want to serve my community. I want to advance in the areas that I'm failing. And basically, that quickly I was able to see where I'm failing. But Matthew chapter 7, verse 7 was an encouragement to me, because here's where I go from here, right? It says, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open. For everyone who asks, receives, and everyone who seeks, finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be open, right? So here's the idea. Remember, the context he's talking about is prayer. If you want something, what should you do? Should ask, right? Another verse that's in my mind is James chapter 2, when it says this. He says, you don't have because why? He says, because you don't ask. The reason you don't have it is because you're going to ask. And he's telling you this, and he says, ask and you'll be given, right? And I was studying through all the Gospels all the way up until the resurrection of Jesus. I was going through all 4 Gospels leading up to Easter. And I remember a verse that I had a hard time with for a long time before I really understood it. But Jesus, when He's preparing them for Him to die and to be rose again and go back and sit at the right hand of God, He says it's in John chapter 14, 13 and 14, He'll say, ask anything and I'll give it to you. Right? He's telling, ask anything, right? And for a long time that was a mystery to me, right? Because you ever ask God for anything and it didn't happen? And I remember, I've seen that verse misused so much, because I watch TV and listen to the radio, and they say, listen, Jesus says ask anything and it's going to be given to you. And then the thing is, if you don't get it, they say, well, you didn't have enough faith. Right, you need to grow in your faith, otherwise you didn't get what you wanted, right? And for a long time, that's kind of the way that I kind of thought about that whole verse, right? But we got to remember the context. He's preparing His disciples. They're going to go out and they're going to do His will. They're going to carry out His mission. But the reason that teaching can't be right is because I always thought about Jesus. Did Jesus ever not receive something He asked the Father for? He didn't, because if you remember what happens in the garden when He's getting ready to die. He says, Father, take this cup from me. He asked God, hey, God, take this cup from me. But at the end of the day, He says, not my will, but your will be done. So was it that Jesus didn't have enough faith? No, it didn't, right? So, of course, 1 John chapter 5, 13 and 14 is that verse that really, changed the way that I looked at that verse. As Jesus tells His disciples, He tells His followers, He says, listen, if you ask anything, He says, and I'll give it to you. And Jesus is saying the same thing in Matthew chapter 7. He's saying, listen, ask, and you're going to receive. But we got to put it in the context of other scriptures, right? And so for me, 1 John chapter 5, 13 and 14 really helped me, because he says this is the confidence. There's this confidence. There's this boldness. This is what we can know. He says this is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything, there's the same thing Jesus said. Jesus said, you ask anything and I'll give it to you. John's saying it right here. He says this is the confidence we have approaching God. If we ask anything according to His will, He hears us. And if we know that He hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we will have it. Man, just that little piece right there changes everything, don't it? He says, you ask anything. But then He has to put that in there, according to His will. And the reason I think that's so powerful, because I get to Matthew chapter 7, right? And it's very important. I'm talking about my failures. I'm talking about my goals, my spiritual goals of wanting to improve, wanting to carry out, be more, don't just allow this death, burial, and resurrection to be some kind of information, but to be like, Jesus, man, you're so powerful. You did all those things. I know how you want me to live. As I sit there listen, the standard is so high that even when we know the good that we should do and we don't do it, He says, that's it. I go, man, that's why we can never get to this idea of you know what, man, I'm just maxed out this Christianity thing now. I mean, I don't know why I'm still coming to church. I'm just coming for y'all. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of got this whole thing, right? No, listen, when you know the good, like, you know the good that you should do, you know that you're missing the mark. Like, you need to raise the level. Like, am I ever going to get it right? Sometimes we can ask those things. But Jesus says this. So he's telling them in the middle of this context, he says, let's ask and it will be given. Seek and you will find. In the context of this idea of like, ask anything and it will be given to you. And we all ask things like, somebody's sick, what do we say? Make them well. Do they always get well? Well, man, we know that's not the truth. We ask God, and we should ask God for everything. But are there things, and this is where I come back to myself as I've been reflecting and trying to make sure and prepare myself about the resurrection and advancing myself in my spirituality. Is it God's will that I'm going to grow in my spirituality? And when I failed in that grocery store, another verse that was coming to my mind was this: think about others before you think of yourself. Do we know those things? We knew those things. I know. And do you think that grocery store is like the only time I ever failed in that verse? I think I fail in those things. I mean, I'm a busy person. I think I fail in those things in times where I don't even think about it. But that specific time, I knew it. I was fighting with it, and I was justifying myself in the middle of it. But at the end of the day, I'm like, man, I failed. And this is the day before I come out here to challenge everybody and preach about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so where do I go from here? Well, you know where I need to go from here? I need to ask God. I need to ask God to strengthen me. I need to ask God to help me to be more aware, to see these opportunities, and to not miss these opportunities, to resist this idea of busyness. I mean, my heart was good. Like, man, listen, I got a lot of really good spiritual things going on tomorrow. And I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail the church. Come up here and don't even know what to say. I don't want to fail in not delegating the responsibility to somebody. I want to make sure I have the items that I need at my house. I'm still like cleaning at the house. I mean, I want my grandkids to come have what they need. Like, all these things are good things. But at the end of the day, there's this verse that I know, but I know. Think about others before you think of yourself. Man, listen, I would have been just fine letting them people go in front of me. Would God provide for me? Think God was going to work through it all? Man, I need to grow. And so as I get here to Matthew chapter 7, I love it because the context is so important. Because you know what's happening? Jesus is preaching the Sermon on the Mount. In the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 5, he starts out, he's talking about who the kingdom of God belongs to. Who wants to be a part of that? Like, man, you know, the poor in spirit, he says the meek. He talks about those who thirst and hunger for the righteousness. He says, later on he goes, you're the salt of the earth. But then he begins to teach them, because remember, these are a lot of the Jewish people come here, and a lot of them believe that they're already really fulfilling a lot of it. He says, you know, Bible says, God's word says don't murder. He says, but really it says, don't even be angry towards your brother. And don't even, whoever says you fool, you know. And then he goes up later on and he talks about, you know, you say an eye for an eye, but he says if somebody slaps you on the cheek, he says turn and give them the other one. He says don't judge. I mean, he goes through these lists of the commandments and what they feel like they're already committing, or they're already fulfilling, and then he kind of lets them know, like, no, these commandments, like, there's a lot higher standard than y'all are even imagining. And as they go through and they hurry about this, like, don't worry. Man, I don't know about you, but I struggle with that. He tells them, you know, the word of God says love your neighbors. He says no, but it goes deeper than that. He says this. He says love your enemies. And they all start to go back and go, whoa, wait a minute. Like, this following God thing, like, it's a lot higher than what we even imagine. And they have to start to get overwhelmed. And that's when he gets to chapter 7 and he's telling them, don't judge one another. Then he gets there and he says, but listen, ask. Like, ask and it'll be given. He then goes, but there's this progression. There's this progression, because it says this: seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. For everyone. Who's everyone? It's everyone. I like to ask these questions. They're pretty evident, right? But he says for everyone, even Ricardo. Even somebody who's super busy sometimes. And even if he's doing good things for the Lord. But he fails. He fails because of maybe anxiety. Sometimes it's like fear. I'm like, man, listen, I have to have, people are dependent on me. I have to have a really good lesson. And you are saying, we're still waiting on that. All these years, right? No, but he says, ask and it'll be given. He says, for the one who finds, he says, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be open. Here's the other thing that it's more than just asking sometimes. Right? Sometimes there's this knocking or there's this asking, and that's just as simple of our words. Man, the first thing is this, and I don't know, maybe y'all are failing in areas, but I know I am, and here's the first thing I'm doing. I'm taking it to the Lord. Like, God, help me to get to my next level in spirituality. Like, help me to grow. Listen, we're living in a dark world. Our society and our communities are slowly getting pulled into all the division and anger and selfishness and greed, and our children are being exposed to all these things. We're the answer. Some urgency here. Ricardo, get it together. But then it means a lot to me because he goes further and then he says seek. You see, there's this asking, and then there's not just asking, but guess what there is next? Well, I'm not seeing it. He says seek. No. And then it just knock. Sometimes I think we forget this. It's something that you know, I had a friend of mine, I remember when I was like 16 or 17, we just started working and stuff and looking for jobs. And he's always looking for a job, this guy, right? Every time he talked to me, who's hiring? The place you work for hiring? We'd be like, yeah, this company's hiring, that company's hiring. You see him again, guess what his question was? I'm looking for a job. I'm looking for a job. And they're like, okay, yeah, well, go over here, go apply over there. You know, it's like he was always asking for a job, but it's like he thought that the companies were gonna knock on his door and drop off an application, right? I mean, he just had this idea, like, I just tell people, and guess what? Like, somehow you're gonna get a job. God works the same way. Like, sometimes it's not always just asking. Now there's this other step. There's this seeking. Like, God, help me to grow in this area. And then here's another one. Man, God's got to be helping me. Man, I need to be tapping into the knowledge of God if I want to start thinking about others before I think of myself. I mean, think of Jesus. It makes it really clear when we got this whole Bible and it boils down to these things, and they're always coming to him saying, "What do I got to do to inherit eternal life?" Or Jesus, what is the most important commandment? And over and over he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your soul, with all your mind. And he says, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's this idea of love God and love others. And then Jesus, before he's going to die, he says, listen, I'm giving you a new commandment. He says, love one another in the same way I've loved you. And here's the thing I want us to hear. It says, and the world will know that you're my disciples. Listen, our world is in desperate need of some disciples right now. Desperate need to be able to identify and go, okay, that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like that Jesus is real. That's what it looks like that we do have God in our life. Now, I don't know about you, so we come down to this. Well, how did Jesus love his disciples? Man, it was sacrifice and it was action. How many of us feel like we're failing in that area? Because, man, our society's fast-paced. Maybe I'm the only one, but, man, I'm telling you, like, it seems like from Monday to Friday, it's gone. But God's providing opportunities all the time for me to show Jesus Christ, to think about others before I think of myself. Man, that's the opposite of conflict. That's the opposite of division, is love and service and sacrifice. That's what's going to bring unity. And number one, so here's the thing. I need to be asking God, like the resurrection of Jesus Christ was the most important thing that's ever happened. It's redeemed me. It's God's power that I want to tap into so that I can be the answer for people that are in darkness. But I can't just ask. I need to seek it out. I need to start studying more. I need to start spending more time with brothers and sisters. I need to start putting my faith in action. I need to start walking into grocery stores, and instead of going like, man, I need to hurry up, I need to start going, maybe I have an opportunity in here. Because when people are around, that's the opportunity to show the difference from the world and the church. But if you're like me, you know what normally I'm thinking? Man, I got to hurry up. I've got too much stuff to do and I don't have enough time. But guess what? We're running out of time on this earth because people are headed in the wrong direction. I mean, even the children that come around us a lot, like we've really got this urgency to be showing them what it looks like to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. And so he says, ask, it's going to be given. He says, seek, and you're going to find. He says, knock, and the door will be open. Continue to search and look, and it's going to happen. He goes on here to verse 9, and he says, which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? Man, how they write about my dad in here? No, I'm just kidding. I'll be in trouble after this number, right? But truthfully, he gives this example like, listen, if you want, remember, we're talking about God's will. Like we all need to ask God for everything. But here's what I want us to think about. Are we focusing on things that we know are God's will? Like, God, help me to be more loving. Help me to be more of a servant. Help me to think about others before I think of myself. Is that God's will? Yes. Is he going to do it? If it's Bible true, it is. But a lot of the times it's putting in that extra seeking, that extra knocking, that consistency, and that discipline. And he goes, but here's the answer. You're going to get it. Why? Because even responsible fathers, if their son would ask him for some food, right? But here's the thing. We're not talking about wants. Right? Because a lot of times we ask God for wants. This is what I want. And kid, these verses right here can be real hard for us to understand in the American culture. Like my grandkids will show up and they'll be like, Papa, I'm hungry. I said, okay. And they'll be like, what kind of snacks do you have? Right? And I'll take them, show them. I don't try not to keep too much snacks in the house. Try to do good, and I'll forget to get them something. Okay, I don't know. I don't really like them snacks. All right, let's go. We go down to this dollar store, go get them something that they like, right? It's like they want something. So as a papa, I'm going to go provide those things. We're talking about children here that are in hunger. That's what he's talking about. Like, which child is going to come to their hunger? I mean, in this day and age, most people, they live each day. Like you go to work today so that I can provide you something to eat today, my kids and my family, because we don't have no fridge. We don't have any of those things. So if a child comes and says, Dad, I'm hungry, like I haven't eaten anything, he's not going to give him a rock. He's not going to give him something that's going to hurt him. What is he going to do? He's going to give them what they need. And that's the thing that we have to understand, is that's what God is going to do for us. He's going to give us what we need, not what we want. But if we're focusing on things that we know are the will of God, man, we can take it to the bank. Like, I know that God wants me to be more kind. You know what I really need to work on? I need to work on my patience. Man, I'm sitting in that line. I can't wait to get out of it. I got to go study, man. Like, I got to go work on this stuff. Like, I've got responsibilities. Is it God's will that I'd have more patience? It is. I've got to put the work. I've got to ask Him. I've got to seek out patience. You know what He's going to do sometimes? He's going to send me situations where I need to be patient. Maybe in a grocery line. Maybe in a grocery line. So I got to trust Him more. I realize, man, I'm failing in my trust in God. That I can't trust Him enough that if I do His will to allow two people to go in front of me, that He's going to provide me with time and strength and the words to get up here and say something that He wants to say. Man, wants me to say. Man, this God, He says, listen, God's always going to come through for our wants, the things that He is according to His will. A responsible father. Look, but here's the other thing when we get down here a little bit further. So he says this, which of you, if your son asks for a bread, will give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? Like, none of you. You're going to give him good things. But he says, if you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask you? You know, sometimes I think that the reason that I don't appreciate the grace of God is enough is because I forget how much need I am of His grace. I mean, God basically telling me right here, He says, though you are evil, and of course, when we really get down to good and evil, when they come to Jesus and they call Him a good teacher, how many people does Jesus say is good? There's only one is good. You say, when they tell Jesus that, He says, why do you call me a good teacher? He said, there's only one that's good. And basically, he's helping them realize what you're calling me is God, because God's the only one that's good. Right? We're human beings. I mean, you have to take your mind to Romans in chapter 3, verse 10, where he says, there is no one righteous, no, not one. He says, we all sin and fall short of the glory of God. And a lot of times what we do, we just look at the bad things. But just like in this context, he was helping them to understand, like, the commandments of God are a lot deeper than you think. It's not just about an eye for an eye, or loving your enemy, or loving your neighbors. It's about loving your enemies. Right? I mean, it's a lot higher standard. And it's, for us, it's not just about not doing bad things. Guess what this Bible is all a lot about? It's about doing good things. It's about thinking about others before you think of yourself. Listen, naturally for us as human beings, we're prone to think of ourselves. I do it all the time. Like, I've got a busy day, I've got a lot of things to do, and I think God a lot of times is sending people into my life, and guess what happens? I'm too busy to think about it. I gotta do, it's like survival. I've got a busy schedule. But I'm on a mission here, and God has a purpose for me, and He's putting people in my path for a reason. Man, I need some help. And as I look at this verse, and he says, listen, if you, though you are evil, know how to give gifts, us as responsible human beings, we're going to do good things for our children. Right? But in comparison to God, He's the only one that's good. We're going to fail Him all the time. I mean, how many sins did it take for Adam and Eve to be thrown out of the garden? Just one. Did they kill each other? No. He said, listen, God said, this is what I want you to do. Guess what they did? They did self. They did what I did in that grocery store. Right? I got one myself. I got stuff to do. Now people can wait. You know what I mean? I mean, even in my mind, I was like, well, maybe I was here first and I just couldn't see it. You know, I don't know. But the right thing is, dude, let them go. Like, just let them go. Show Jesus. They're probably not Christians, so who has a responsibility, them or me? I do. I'm trying to carry the name of Jesus Christ. That's the standard. That's who I'm trying to become. That's who I'm speaking to people about. Hey, do this. And then guess what I'm doing? Think about myself. Man, listen, I want to do better. God's saying, listen, I want you, this standard, listen, when I was telling somebody this not that long ago, when I was growing up, I remember my mom started bringing Christians over to the house. I started hearing them talk like, you know, someone insults you, don't insult them back. They do something to you, I started saying, these Christians are kind of weak. Like, I don't think I really want to be one of them. And then I become a Christian. I was like, man, this is tough stuff, man. Like, this stuff ain't easy. What's easier to do is it's easy to think about others or think of yourself. Is it easy for someone to insult you, not get mad? This stuff is real difficult things, but guess what? God has given us everything that we need. Matter of fact, He came and died and He rose from the dead. And that same power, this same God that could raise someone like Jesus from the dead, His power is at work within me, because He can do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine. He says that power work right here. The things that I'm failing, I can do better. Look what He says. Look, I know He can even get me done on time. He says this. Verse 12. It all comes down to this. So in everything, do to others what you would want have them done to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. You know how many times, though, I've been in line and I have like 2 or 3 items, and 2 or 3 people are in front of me and they got cards that say, hey, sir, would you go ahead and go in front of us if you're going to be through here? Man, how good does that feel when you have a busy schedule? I like that when people do that for me. Treat others like you want to be treated. Each situation that we go into. Here's the golden rule. Here's the thing that Jesus would do. It's because, listen, Jesus, when He left heaven, came to the earth, was born in a barn, and all through His life and ministry, all the way up to that cross, and He rose again. He did all of that for other people. He didn't do any of that stuff for Himself. All that was sacrifice. All that was a commitment to others. Man, that's really the challenge that I have for us as a church, is we're living in a very selfish, fallen, and broken world. Focus on the things that we know are God's will and ask Him to do it. And this God is faithful. He'll do it. If there's anything we can do for you, prayer, Bible study, obey the gospel, you don't just have to come as we stand and sing. You can get a hold of us during the week, but please come as we stand and sing if you need to.